As I said earlier, my name is Chris Young. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at the Texas Department of Transportation. I also wear a couple of other different hats with the Transportation Research Board and with AASHTO as well. So if you have any questions, just understand that I'm coming from a context of tailoring this presentation to everyone who's on this call here today. So we're looking at this from an organizational perspective. And this is more of a show and tell. We're going to show and tell what we're doing at the Texas Department of Transportation. Whether or not that applies to you is completely up to y'all. At the worst, this could be a case study of just what Texas is doing. At the best, it could provide some recommendations for you and your organization going forward, and something we might want to share with others. So with that, I will click on to the next slide. So this is all the fun stuff we're going to be covering today. So these are all the 23 slides we're going to be covering. Some of them contain multiple screen grabs and images that we'll walk through, and I'll talk a little more about what we're doing. So as an overview, I'm approaching this presentation as talking about workforce analytics and building a workforce analytics capability in a Department of Transportation. I think TxDOT has done a good job, and so I'm happy to present about this. And I'm sure many of you will recognize some of these things that you're already doing in your own organization or have at least started considering. So just to give some overview of who we are in time and space, TxDOT is about 13,100 people, full-time equivalents, not including consultants and contractors who may be loosely affiliated with us or doing additional work for us. And just to give you a little bit of overview when we're talking about workforce analytics and those capabilities, the Human Resources Division falls under our administrative leadership. It is separate from engineering, and it is alongside all the other centralized support functions at TxDOT. So we have centralized HR. We have plenty of folks in the field who are Human Resource Division representatives, but they answer back to Austin and to our Chief of Human Resources. So you can see I put a little box around the Systems Administration and Analytics box in our Human Resources Division. So Human Resources Division at TxDOT is about 175 people. It's 175 positions, about that. And the 5 folks that are in that red box there with the arrow next to it, the Systems Administration and Analytics, those are the ones that really represent our workforce analytics capabilities. 2 of those 5 people in that box are our professional data analysts. And we'll talk a little more about their adventures and their capabilities as we go throughout this presentation. Since we're looking at an org chart, it only seems fair that we talk about a functional analysis. So we do perform functional analyses for all of our units at TxDOT, either ad hoc or as part of our routine updates in providing that information to the public and to the legislature. And so I highlighted what we have as our functional analysis for that group of 5 people that are in that box right there. That capability represents our workforce analytics capability at TxDOT. And this is what we tell the entire world that that group is doing. You can see from that description there, it is not particularly detailed. It does not contain a lot of stuff that you might start seeing in current functional analyses related to data analytics. But I thought it was a good idea to highlight this is what we're telling the world we do in terms of workforce analytics right now. And I think almost everything that we're going to talk about for the rest of our time here together shows up in those first 2 bullets, in assisting staff with HR data, and then creating data analytics using Tableau, which is our primary visualization tool at TxDOT, and other software tools. So if we're talking about how we're managing a data workforce and how complicated it could get, I highlight that what we're using right now is a very simple and straightforward terminology that almost anybody could add to a functional analysis right now if they were standing up a capability. So that's kind of my theme going forward, is that We don't have to boil the entire ocean here when it comes to workforce analytics. And a lot of what we're doing already, we would recognize as workforce analytics, even though we formally haven't called it out as such. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is what these folks are doing day to day. Our data analysts are doing day to day as part of this functional analysis. So that means for us at TxDOT, we always start with probably the most important thing that our customers internally see and even externally see are our dashboards. So those two data analysts are working to update workforce dashboards. And the second thing they're doing is customized reporting, corresponding to that first bullet there on that list in the functional analysis. And the third thing they're doing is predictive modeling, which we'll touch on briefly as we go through some of these screen grabs going forward. So we'll talk about 6 different dashboards. I'll talk about these first 3 right up front, and then we'll talk about some reporting, and then we'll go into that predictive modeling. So some dashboards that we have, you can see there are for our full-time equivalent employee positions. And we're tasked with monitoring those numbers and using that as a baseline for required reporting. We're also monitoring headcount, and we're monitoring hires and separations. So most of our agencies are already doing this in some form or fashion. Probably the biggest difference between someone having a data analytics capability and simply reporting these numbers is how automated the process has become and how frequent these reports are coming. So for us, we're using dashboard and software to make these near real-time metrics that can be pulled at any point and don't require specific hours to generate static reports that are just sent out via email and then just kind of start to expire the second we hit send on the email. So I'll show a couple of screen grabs just to give you all a sense of what our dashboards look like. Again, I said earlier that we're using Tableau as our visualization software. There are plenty of other products out there that do visualization. And for many of us who grew up in the Excel world, Excel may still be just good enough to do what you need to do in terms of workforce analytics. So this is certainly not a commercial for Tableau or any other software. So looking at that full-time equivalent employees, we have this is a static grab of that dashboard, but it's constantly being updated on the back end, and it is constantly being updated nightly, and then revealing our current headcount, our average number of employees per quarter, and our maximum average headcount. So making sure that we don't go over our headcount is very important in the state of Texas. We've been noticed in the past for the times that we have gone over headcount inadvertently. So that's a very high priority issue for our executives. And as a result, it is a high priority for our data analysts in the human resources division. As we go forward, when we get to the Q&A session, I am willing to pull up some of these dashboards live and risk crashing this entire computer system so y'all can see some of this, but I definitely wanted to give you the screen grabs so you at least know the look and feel of our dashboards. The next thing that we're looking at is the overview of headcount. And we've got those in various years, and we track those from year to year so we can look at those trends. And even without being a statistician or a data scientist, you're going to look at those trends and say, hey, everything seems to be heading up and to the right, which is what we expected based on how we're growing and the additional position allocations we've been given by our legislature. That's what we would expect to see. In this case, this visualization looks a little bit like a whisker chart if you're in the quality assurance and quality control world. And so it is intentionally intended to look like that, so we can show that, hey, this isn't exactly where we are day to day, but this is the range we're at, and this is a general overall trend. And so with all visualization tools, when it comes to data analysis, we're looking to tell a story in a visual way, where other people that look at this do not need someone to come in and explain everything to them. They can see intuitively, hey, everything's heading up and to the right, which means the number of positions, our headcount, is increasing. And so that's the story that's telling. You can dig into that data all day long, and many folks do. But that's the workforce analytics story that we're telling in one quick snapshot. Another thing we look at is our allocation rate. I like to draw attention to that top right-hand corner. If you can look at that, it's really tiny, but it says beta. So I highlight that our dashboards are always a work in progress. Our data analysts are always refining, tweaking, putting out new patches, finding new ways to respond to customer requests that make the data a little more palatable for our customers so that we can tell that instantaneous story. With all visualization tools, we want to be able to show data in such a way that anybody who looks at it just intuitively, instinctively knows what they're looking at and does not require a lot of explanation. I say that, but you can see even at the top, we've put in some little tutorial language to walk people through how to dig through that data. And there is a lot to look at this one dashboard. If you're just looking at this one screen, most of our users will drill down on their individual units to get some focus and really highlight their units because everybody cares about their favorite subject themselves. So most folks drill down on this. This would be an entire organizational view, but you can click on any of those units, which are our districts, and then lower come our divisions, and it will highlight just that data for you and let you look at it and play with it. The other three dashboards that we use quite frequently for our HR analytics include the vacancy rates and counts of vacancies. And I wanted to highlight some of our other uses of our dashboards. That includes our career development programs. And the last one, which is a little unique and a little different from other dashboard uses, is our career pathing tool. We're very proud of that. It's really our answer to self-directed succession planning amongst our workforce. And we used our data analysts and those capabilities to make that become a reality for us when we found there was really nothing in the marketplace, in the vendor marketplace, that could help us do what we wanted to do. So again, I'll give you a couple of screen grabs of those three different dashboards. So vacancy rates and counts of vacancies, we have that. We do look at that. I'd like to highlight on this one, if you look at the top left-hand corner, and up to this point, you've noticed that every single dashboard looks just a little bit different. We do our best to standardize, but the goal here is not to make it super pretty. The goal is to provide data in the most palatable format for the customers in a way that they can use it. In this case, this data is showing up on our administration dashboard. So that's available internally to every single person who has access behind the firewall. So that's all of our users in the agency can look at that and see what we're tracking from an HR perspective that corresponds directly to our strategic plan and our administration's goals. So vacancy rates is one of those key performance indicators that the entire organization is tracking to answer some program evaluation questions related to HR analytics. So vacancy rates are probably something that every HR organization on this call or affiliated with this call is tracking. We track it very formally and we include it as part of our organizational dashboard, as well as what we're tracking internally in our human resources division. Not all of our dashboards are internally facing to the entire workforce, but this one is. And that's why I highlight that, because this is a different tier of data that is available to the entire workforce, whereas some of the earlier dashboards you saw were only available to certain manager levels or leaders in the organization. And making those determinations is really part of the data analytics profession and how we're presenting that data to others. And I think that's important to mention because of what we're going to talk about later when it comes to public-facing data. I mentioned that we were looking at career development. We're an engineering organization. We have about 500 young engineers or aspiring engineers, and we're tracking their career progression because it's tied directly to their current job responsibilities. And those really represent the next generation of leaders for our organization. So our engineering assistant program, and most of our agencies have those, is a flagship program for the Human Resources Division and something that we share widely with others. It involves a great level of commitment. All of our district engineers, our division engineers, all of our senior transportation engineers are highly involved in developing the younger workforce. So even though we only have 500 people who are actively in the program, it really touches the entire organization, which prompted us to approach our data analytics folks and say, hey, is there a better way for us to share the progress, the obligations, the linkages amongst all of our engineering assistants so that all of our senior leaders would have the opportunity to understand what their young engineers were up to and where they were in their progression in their career. And so we do have a very active workforce development dashboard for engineering assistants that tracks the entire state. And we recognize from our customers, probably some very senior and seasoned transportation engineers who routinely asked us, well, how do we compare to everybody else? How do we compare to like-sized units? We're a rural district. How do we compare with other rural districts? So we had to have that data in such a way where they could go in there and do that themselves and that they could, quote unquote, slice and dice the data so that they could tell the story to their young engineers down and then up to their district engineers and other fellow senior leaders about how their district was performing. It creates some healthy competition, but at the end of the day, we do a better job of tracking the progress of our young engineers who are committed to us for at least 4 years to be fully part of this program, as most young engineers are in other departments of transportation. That segues nicely into what I consider probably our most exploratory use of dashboards, which was also created for us by our data analytics and our workforce analytics capabilities. And that's been our answer to succession planning. So we've always said that at the Department of Transportation, we don't do succession planning, not in the traditional sense, because I can't pick who will come after me. Everything is a fair and open competition. For most levels of our professional jobs, we're required by law to advertise those, regardless of whether or not we've found somebody who would be the perfect replacement for us. So we've shifted our conversation from succession planning to career development. The best we can do is we can get you ready to compete for the next level in the organization. What happens after that preparation is at the whim of the universe and hiring managers, and so we can't make any guarantees about succession. But the career development program at TxDOT is our answer to contemporary succession planning for a public agency. And one of the first questions that we always got asked by folks was, yeah, I'm not sure where I can go next. Can you help me understand that? Now, with 13,000 people here and a human resources division that is less than 200 people, we don't have the capacity or the capability to reach out to every single one of those folks to have that personal conversation. So we used our data analytics capability to build this tool in such a way that uses HRIS data and the individual user data to let them navigate their own career dashboard. And so that's what you're looking at there. You're looking at someone who is a transportation engineer two, who is just logged on to the dashboard. The system knows it's a transportation engineer two that's logged onto the system, and it displays that information. In the center column, it says, this is your current job description. And then on the left side, those are active bubbles that actually move around. And that left-hand column says, transportation engineer twos usually historically have gone to these positions in the organization. So you look at those left-hand bubbles, and you can drive that little conversation there by hovering over the bubbles, and you know that, oh, transportation engineers twos usually become threes. They go to fours. They could be assistant area engineers. And then you can keep clicking on each one of those bubbles to really track a career progression based on historical data. So we didn't just, take all the levels and put them in a hierarchy and make it static. That left-hand column there is all built on HRIS data from career moves from people based on position descriptions and titles. So we've known the historical data of all the transportation engineer twos and where they've gone for their next role. So that left-hand box is actually a very powerful data story that's told in a very simple format that is intended for a user who's looking at career progression. We even took it a step further and we said, okay, even if you look at those things and you're looking at those bubbles on the left-hand side, you know where you could go, where people have historically gone, but are there any opportunities for us? And that's where the column on the right-hand side came up. So we've also tapped into the talent acquisition part of our HRIS to display that data that's in the third column. Those are the open vacancies for all the positions in the bubbles that are in the left-hand column. So not only are we tracking the historical HRIS data in the left-hand column, and we're tracking the current information based on position description in the center column, the right-hand column is coming from our talent acquisition module that is taking real-time data to show the user what current opportunities exist and how far they are from their home address and their position where they're working right now. So that if someone wants to go in here and do some self-directed succession planning, they could apply for jobs right now with one click on any of those right-hand job position descriptions, which will take them right back out to our talent acquisition module, and they could apply right there from that screen. So in this way, we use this dashboard technology and the HR analytics capabilities that we had inherent in the human resources division to answer a problem that we were having within our enterprise of how do we customize a career journey for every single employee in the agency at a way that's scalable, efficient, sustainable, real-time, and has some call to action. So this is a very complicated dashboard. It's intended to be interactive, but it's really an outgrowth of what HR analytics can be used for in the organization. On top of dashboards, I mentioned earlier that we do reporting. So we do ad hoc reporting and we do customized reporting for internal customers, including things that include position allocations. So who's got how many positions where, and that allows us to determine if we need to shift around or who's over their allocation, who might need additional attention from HR or engineering operations. We also track retirement eligibility and turnover rates. Most of you are doing these things already. The difference with our experience has been that we've automated this in such a way that we can do this at scale and we can do this in near real time, so that when we do get a fiery call from legislature or the executive office, we can pull up that data instantaneously and give everybody real-time information without having to do specialized queries, custom weird reports, or static reports that are going to expire the second we click send in our email. On top of reporting and dashboards, we have come into the world of predictive modeling. So predictive modeling in terms of data analysis, this is where we see a real difference in competency amongst the data analytics professionals. Entry-level data analysts are good at tracking, automating, visualizing, and presenting existing data. And that, I think that's where a lot of people start, and that's where a lot of organizations remain, is looking backwards. And predictive modeling really takes us into the forecasting world. It really takes us into the predicting tomorrow's weather kind of world. A senior level data analyst, we would expect, including the data scientists, can take all of that existing data and use that analysis to offer predictions with appropriate caveats, because no one can predict the future. Predictive modeling is really an outgrowth of a nascent data analytics capability. And I think from my perspective, transportation often falls into a few prediction traps. First, because our tendency is to follow the sun, we expect most years to behave like past years. And that's a very comfortable place to be, especially in the maintenance and operations world. Snow will fall in December. We can predict that, which means that we don't often challenge those assumptions. And second, because transportation planning extends 2, 10, 24 years into the future, we're really kind of organizationally and institutionally invested in our underlying assumptions being correct, almost trying to will them to hold for that entire 24-year plan and for the duration of our plans. And sometimes that's to our detriment. This visualization shows our predictions for headcount made back in 2022 in the gray band, and the blue line shows the actual numbers of employees as we were going forward. This chart was important for us because, as I said earlier, we had gone over our allocations in previous years and were told quite squarely by our Transportation Commission and the legislature that we shall not go over that allocation again. So over the years since that happened, it's been very important to be able to inform our executives where we are in terms of headcount and making sure that we were towing the line between having the right amount of people and not going over our allocation. Certainly human behavior goes into this. And because all of our hiring managers have hiring authority and all of our districts and divisions have individual hiring authority, we certainly recognize as an organization that some districts were holding back on hiring, and we had to continually put forward that message that, hey, we still need you to hire. You don't need to worry about going over your allocations, ... until you do, and then it's going to be an issue. So in order to support that narrative and to make sure that everybody was doing their best to maximize their headcount, we had to do some predictive modeling to say, hey, this is where we anticipate being at the end of the fiscal year. This did a couple of things for us. This helped our executives understand that we were maximizing our headcount, we were still making hires, and we could kind of predict where we were going to be at the end of the year, or at least take a guess at it, which put us in a good position right before our legislative session started to be able to ask for more people. So the way I frame this is that the official executive question comes out as, hey, where will our headcount be at the end of the fiscal year? And does that put us in a position to request more positions from the legislature in the next fiscal year? In more casual terminology, the way I describe it was our executive asking us quite simply, are we going to look foolish asking for more people if we have a ton of open positions already 3 months from now? Is this going to be worth our time? And are we going to expend political capital on something that gets us laughed out of a legislative session or a commission meeting? And so that was important to us to make sure that we were maximizing headcount and that we could give some sort of analysis and prediction for the future as to where we would expect our headcount to be at the end of the fiscal year so that that could inform the rest of our HR planning process. Predictive modeling is a lot of art and science, and it is certainly not guaranteed because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow morning. And I'm sure most of our weather forecasters would tell us that modeling is good, but we won't know until the weather actually blows through. So just an opportunity to look at our predictive modeling, the reporting we provide, and the dashboards. In order of what our customers see most, it's the dashboards, then it's the ad hoc custom reporting, and then it's the predictive modeling. We do not do this that often, and it is because it is a complicated and artful practice. It is something that we wouldn't expect of a lot of folks who are just starting to build their data analytics capabilities. But I did want to talk about how we developed our workforce analytics capabilities. These are the competencies that we've highlighted as being important to data analysts or workforce analytics professionals in the HR world. I think we have a lot of these here at TxDOT. You can see that there's a lot of emphasis on being able to use IT systems and being able to use historical data as well as visualization. Where we would advise finding these sorts of capabilities, we have to recognize that a lot of these capabilities already exist within our organizations. We just might not be recognizing it as such. So our traffic analysts, our GIS analysts, IT professionals, planners, materials, even the finance folks are already accomplished analysts. They just don't refer to themselves as data analysts. And of course, in the wild, some of our hires have come from non-transportation sectors who did not even realize that we were doing this kind of cool stuff. And I think that's going to be a trend that continues through the future. As we look to source more data analytics professionals, we're going to find them in more non-traditional, non-transportation fields. And that's great because I think that provides a complementary fit to what we're already doing and will show us new and interesting ways to do things. So to highlight us as, because I said this was a show and tell, I'm going to talk about our data analytics team. You'll recall earlier we said our team is about 5 people. That includes 2 data analysts. So everything you've seen to date has been championed by 2 data analysts working in the Human Resources Division at TxDOT. And this is where we started. These are real names, real people. Last names have been hidden to protect the innocent. But I'll highlight these 3 professionals. So we started off with Paul. He was already existing in the Human Resources Division, was already in charge of the workforce analytics capability, and had been there for quite some time. But was firmly rooted in old school HR, great capacity for analytics, but was responding a lot to ad hoc reports and a lot of system limitations. And he recognized that as such. He knows the organization, he knows the executives and what they want, he knows data, and he knows HR. And Paul was in a great position to recognize that, hey, I need a little more help if we're going to modernize our analytics capability in HR. So much credit to Paul as a senior leader. And that brought in John. John was our first hire specifically for data analytics in the Human Resources Division. Now, John knows data, John knows tools, John knows computer languages, and John knows science. And so between Paul and John, they really started coming up with some good stuff and really focusing on data and what data was available, what systems and tools were in place, and starting to look at those 2 things together. As that evolved into a practice in the Human Resources Division, that led us to a point where we recognize, hey, we still need to respond to customers a little better than we're responding. So we're still in the ad hoc reporting business. We're in the reporting on existing data business, and we're not really getting out in front of problems or helping senior leaders in a consulting capacity to think about their data in new and interesting ways. We also recognize that John is a consummate data professional and a self-described data nerd, and his brain works 10 times faster than his mouth, which makes presentations with John and sometimes with Paul a little difficult, which is why we brought in Tommy, who knows data, knows tools, knows visualizations better than anything else, and knows presentations. And so our data analytics team really evolved into being a combination of these 3 types of people. Now, in a perfect world, I would like to get all 3 of these people in one position. Not only is it cheaper, but it is easier to manage. But in our case, since this is a show and tell, we came up with this capability and our HR analytics capability in such a way that it was really a combination of these 3 people working in concert in tandem, which really allowed us to elevate our data analytics game. Paul has since retired, and now it's currently John and Tommy, and they are now largely self-sufficient and staying ahead of customer requests. So we've actually got that back down to 2 positions. Our job descriptions, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but we're looking at when we're looking specifically for data analysts, we're looking for someone with a bachelor's degree and 4 years in data analysis, real data analysis, statistics, research. that is what we've currently got for our job descriptions. And I'm happy to share our current job descriptions for our data analysts and our data scientists. For us, this represents, these job descriptions represent a salary range of about $69,000 up to $118,000. Our data scientist is in a range of 84K to about 142K. And looking back at that previous slide with 3 bodies, I would rather have one person who could do a lot more, hire them at a higher rate as a senior data analyst, rather than have to have 3 additional positions for data analysis. We do have job descriptions. I'll be happy to share those after our session here, so you can have a look at how we do things in Texas and how things are classified. I do want to highlight something that I think is important for this group. All of our job descriptions at the Texas Department of Transportation track back to state classifications. So for those states that have centralized HR or administrative functions, where you're forced to use someone else's compensation and classification schema, it would make sense to make sure that things are aligned correctly. Data and being data forward sometimes has a tendency to lead to a classification that is closely aligned with IT. And we've recognized that data analysis and the way that we're using our data analysts is not necessarily aligned with IT, but more closely aligned with planning, research, and statistics, which is where it lives in Texas, and in my opinion, is where it belongs. That is definitely something for you to consider when you're looking at your job classifications within your own state. And that takes us to kind of, the naming convention. We can get very academic here about job descriptions, but I think it's worth noting that when we say data analytics, I mean, realistically, isn't that redundant? Isn't it like saying an ATM machine? Data analytics, you can't do analysis without data. And we have identified business analysts, management analysts, and other unique positions that have qualifiers associated with that analysis title. I don't know of any of us who just have plain old analysts. Maybe some of us do, and maybe that's a great place to be when it comes to a data analytics capability. And I also offer that, even though we have data analysts, as I said earlier, we're not all in the same field. So is it really unreasonable to consider a traffic safety engineer who's doing crash prediction models? Are they any less of a data analyst than John or Tommy or even Paul? Or is a senior planner looking at population modeling? Are they any less of a data scientist? We may be comfortable where we are in terms of job descriptions and maybe just cleaning up job responsibilities or specifically highlighting something as data analytics. Even looking forward, I'm sure we've all been told, hey, we're probably going to need an AI prompt engineer. I would challenge everybody on this call to think about, if you were in an HR unit, where would you put that person in terms of a job family? AI prompt engineer is what you're going to post and hire for, but what job position, what job description does that track back to in your classification system? And is your classification system ready for that sort of thing? Moving forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about what that means for us in terms of risks and opportunities. So most of the dashboards that you saw right now were internal, but we understand that we have responsibilities to the public and to open government. So a lot of these dashboards will end up public facing, or some of our customers will know that that data is available. So that means that not only do we have to make things work well for our customers in dashboard, we also have to make sure that they're accessible and that the public facing dashboards and data that we're sharing with others are probably the same things that we're going to have internally. That's going to be a big challenge for folks. And it may be a risk, it may be an opportunity. That also means data governance needs to come into play here. And so if we do not have a data governance strategy, or that's being dominated really by our IT folks, it would encourage us from a workforce analytics perspective to have HR as part of that conversation. And we have to recognize that artificial intelligence and machine learning is coming to data analysis in new and interesting ways. Data analytics tasks will transform, and our customer requests will transform. I have not seen it yet, but I know it is a matter of time before some clever journalist discovers how to teach an AI chatbot to routinely send Freedom of Information Act requests or open records requests automatically every single day to every single public agency in your state to ask for everything you have on topic X. And right now, we're going to have a human responding to that. And I do not think that we'll be able to keep up with that. And that will transform how we manage data and what we're presenting to the public in the future. So my recommendations and our recommendations from the TxDOT experience and kind of what we've developed so far in terms of our HR analyst capability are first to identify a data champion for the organization, or at least some work group that represents a community of practice, not unlike the knowledge management community's community of practice. And then I encourage all of us to look at how we're doing our HR things. If our job descriptions are sufficient, if we can look throughout the rest of the enterprise to analyze who's doing data analytics tasks, identify them, make sure they're classified appropriately, and then get them together with that data champion. And maybe even consider establishing a unique job family for data analysts, and then continuing to source and recruit for new roles, looking outside the transportation sector. And then the final recommendations we have are to support existing staff. My mantra for leadership is that you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. So recognizing those folks who we already identified through HR, who has that data analytics capability, and then being able to support them, either with unique learning, unique experiences, and then working with IT to identify those visualization tools that will make things work better, faster, cheaper for us. And this takes us back to kind of training and development for what I refer to as, quote unquote, the soft stuff. All the things that lead to asking good questions are where we want our data analysts to be. Right now, there is a tyranny of metrics and almost a tyranny of dashboards. We're tracking everything we can because we have it. And very rarely are we going back and asking the 5 whys or any whys, or is this measure still valuable for us? So having the capabilities inherent in our organization, these are things that we can do now to ask better questions of our data and to ask better questions of our executives who are asking for that data, why they want it, what they're getting at, how it ties to our strategy, will make us better data analysts. And then we can always work on presentations, communications, visualization, and storytelling. Like I said, if you can just show a dashboard and instantaneously someone understands the story that is being told there and walks away with that theme, then we've succeeded as purveyors of dashboards. So with that, I know I've gone a little over time and I apologize. I'll make it up to you in the future. But I'll open up the floor to questions and answers about anything that you've seen so far. So hearing no specific questions, I'll offer that we'll send out this presentation as well as the job descriptions that I described, and so and a quick little cheat sheet of the recommendations that were listed within the presentation, so that you can share that outwards. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to follow up with me directly at TxDOT. I'll be happy to answer those as they come up.